The sun was setting over Los Angeles, casting a warm glow across the city. As usual, the air was filled with the sounds of traffic, sirens in the distance, and the hum of busy people rushing to their next destination. But inside my studio it was just me and the music. At 32, I had made a name for myself in the music industry. Producing tracks for rising artists had become my life. Every day I worked long hours, often losing track of time as I pieced together sounds, rhythms, and melodies. My job was both my passion and my escape. There was no room for distractions. No room for anything that might pull my focus away from the next big hit. Vanessa, my wife, was also busy. She worked as an influencer and a brand ambassador, and her schedule was just as packed. She was always in front of the camera, attending photo shoots, promoting the latest fashion trends, and collaborating with brands. Yet, despite our chaotic lives, we had always tried to stay connected. We would talk when we could, meet for dinner when possible, and plan time for each other. It wasn't always easy, but we made it work. That evening, Vanessa had texted me just as I was getting settled into the studio. She told me she was finishing up a photo shoot for a new campaign and would be heading over soon. "I'll see you in a bit, babe," she'd written. But then, a few hours later, just as I was deep into mixing a new track, I received another message from her. It was short, but it caught me off guard. "Running late. Got a last-minute meeting with a colleague at a restaurant. I'll be there afterward." I read the message a couple of times. A colleague? A meeting? Sounded strange. We had talked earlier in the day about meeting up for dinner, but now she was with someone else, somewhere else. I felt a pang in my chest that I couldn't explain. Sure, Vanessa had her career, but her work had never taken her away from me like this before. Something about it felt off. I shrugged it off and tried to focus on my work. Maybe I was just overthinking it. But the feeling lingered, gnawing at the back of my mind, distracting me from the rhythm of the music. I glanced at the clock. It was getting late. Vanessa wasn't here yet, and she hadn't texted again. I figured I'd just finish up what I was doing, but the longer I sat there, the more restless I became. I reached for my phone, quickly checking her social media. I didn't know why, but I had this strange urge to see if she had posted anything. Maybe it would put my mind at ease, maybe not. But there was nothing new. No updates, no new photos, no mentions of a meeting or anything that might explain her sudden change in plans. An hour passed. I had no idea what time it was anymore. The studio lights dimmed as I stepped away from the desk, pacing around, trying to push the feeling of unease away. As the minutes ticked by, I couldn't shake the thought of her being at that restaurant. My curiosity started to outweigh my better judgment. I knew it was probably nothing, just my mind running wild, but something told me I needed to see for myself. I packed up my things, grabbed my jacket, and left the studio. I wasn't sure where I was headed or why I was even doing this, but I had to know what was going on. The restaurant she had mentioned wasn't far from the studio, and I made my way there, the streets buzzing with energy, but my mind was elsewhere. When I arrived, I parked my car and walked toward the entrance. The restaurant was sleek and modern, the kind of place Vanessa would go to meet someone important. But when I walked in, I froze. There, at a corner table, was Vanessa. She was sitting across from a man, her laughter ringing out through the dimly lit space. I knew immediately who he was, the famous photographer from the fashion world. They were talking closely, too closely. She leaned in, smiling as he whispered something to her. It was the kind of closeness that made my stomach turn. The kind of closeness that felt personal. The way they were looking at each other, the easy way they laughed. It wasn't just a business meeting. I stood there for a moment, my heart racing in my chest, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I wanted to march over to the table and confront them both. But something stopped me. I wasn't angry, not yet. Instead, I felt a deep ache in my chest. It was like something inside of me snapped, but I didn't know how to react. So, I turned around quietly, slipping out of the restaurant without a word. I needed to leave. I needed to get away before I did something I would regret. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. I just left. I didn't know what would happen next, but as I drove home in silence, the weight of the moment settled over me. Something had changed. The life I had been living, the life I thought I understood, no longer felt the same. And I knew deep down that nothing would be the same after tonight. The next day felt like a blur. I barely slept the night before, my mind replaying the scene at the restaurant over and over again. I couldn't shake the image of Vanessa sitting so closely to him, laughing, looking at him in a way I hadn't seen her look at me in a long time. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together, and the pain twisted in my chest like a knot that wouldn't untie. When I woke up, I didn't know how to face her. I wasn't angry yet, but the hurt was growing by the minute. The uncertainty had turned into something much darker, something I couldn't ignore anymore. I went through my usual morning routine trying to keep busy, but nothing felt normal. It was as if everything I thought I knew about my life was crumbling. Vanessa, as usual, had her own busy schedule. I knew she would be preoccupied with work, so I waited. I waited for her to reach out, for her to explain herself, for her to tell me it was all just a misunderstanding. But the hours passed and there was nothing. No text, no call, nothing. By late afternoon, I couldn't wait any longer. I decided to confront her directly. I wasn't going to let her brush this under the rug. She needed to face what had happened. I called her, and after a few rings she picked up. "Hey David," she said, her voice light, almost like nothing had happened. "How's everything going?" I could feel my jaw clenching. "Vanessa, I need to talk to you." "Where are you right now?" There was a brief pause on the other end of the line before she responded. "I'm just wrapping up a few things. I'll be home soon." I could hear the subtle edge of panic in her voice, but I wasn't sure if it was because she was trying to hide something, or if it was just me imagining things. "No, we need to talk now," I said firmly. "I'll be waiting for you." She hesitated again but then agreed. "Okay, I'll be there soon." When she arrived, it was clear she hadn't expected this conversation. She walked in with her usual smile, carrying the weight of her day's work on her shoulders, but the moment she saw me sitting there, her expression faltered. She knew something was off. I didn't waste time. I looked her in the eye and said the words that had been building up inside me all day. "I saw you last night." She froze, the color draining from her face. For a split second, I could see the panic in her eyes, the same way a deer caught in headlights might react. She didn't say anything, just stared at me, waiting for the next question. "What were you doing at that restaurant with him?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with the hurt I could no longer hide. She opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. Then she closed it, trying to compose herself. "David, it's not what you think." "Don't lie to me, Vanessa." I cut her off, my frustration bubbling up. "I saw you with him. The way you were sitting there, laughing together, it didn't look like a business meeting. It didn't look like anything but two people who were way too comfortable with each other." Her eyes dropped to the floor, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a crack in her facade. "David, please," she whispered, finally looking up at me. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I didn't mean for it to get out of hand, but we've been working on some projects together and And what? You thought I wouldn't notice?" I snapped. "You thought you could hide it from me? We've been married for how long, Vanessa? And you go out like this?" Her face reddened and she shook her head. "I didn't want to hurt you. It was just, I got caught up. He's a friend and we've been working together for a while, but I never meant for it to go this far." I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "I don't believe you." Her voice quivered as she continued, "David, it's not what you think. I swear there's nothing between us." "Then why were you laughing together like that?" I interrupted, my voice cold. "Why were you so close?" She didn't have an answer. Her lips parted, but no words came out. And in that silence, the truth hit me. The truth that I had known deep down but hadn't been willing to face. This wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just a one-time slip. This was a pattern. And I had been blind to it for far too long. "I'm done, Vanessa," I said, my voice low but final. "I can't keep doing this. I'm asking for a divorce." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp. Vanessa's eyes widened, and I saw her mouth open and close, as if trying to form a response. But there was nothing left to say. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but the apology felt hollow. I stood up, my decision made. There was no turning back now. "There's nothing to be sorry for," I replied, my voice steady. "It's over." I turned and walked away, feeling a strange sense of relief. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to look at. The days following our confrontation were a blur. Everything felt different, cold, empty. I wasn't sure what to do with myself anymore. I had been living in a relationship that had suddenly come undone, and I didn't know how to navigate this new reality. It wasn't just the marriage itself that I was mourning, but everything that had come with it. The trust, the plans we'd made, the life we'd built together. It was all falling apart and I wasn't sure how to pick up the pieces. Vanessa tried to reach out to me the next few days, but I couldn't bring myself to answer her calls or read her messages. What was there to say? What could she possibly say that would change anything? She had already made her choices and I had made mine. The decision to end our marriage felt final, and I knew there was no turning back. She showed up at the studio a few days after the breakup, looking frazzled, her makeup smudged, her usual polished demeanor gone. I hadn't expected her to come to me here, but of course I wasn't surprised. The world she lived in was public and nothing ever stayed private for long. The moment she stepped inside, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. "David," she said softly, her voice cracking. "Can we talk?" I looked up from my desk, my gaze cold. I had spent the last few days trying to regain some semblance of normalcy, focusing on work, pushing away the emotions that had threatened to overwhelm me. But when I saw her standing there, everything came rushing back. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal. I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't owe her anything anymore. But she wasn't going to leave without saying her piece, I could tell. So, I nodded once, barely acknowledging her presence, and gestured for her to sit. "I never wanted it to end like this," she began, her voice trembling. "David, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. I never meant to betray you like this." I crossed my arms, leaning back in my chair. "But you did. You did betray me, Vanessa. You lied, you hid things from me, and now we're here. You can't just say you're sorry and expect everything to be okay. I'm done." Her eyes welled with tears. "I never wanted to hurt you. I was just confused. The pressure, the attention, the work, it all got to me and I made some bad choices. But I love you, David. I always have." I exhaled sharply, trying to contain the frustration bubbling inside me. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have done what you did. Love isn't about playing games or finding comfort in someone else when things get tough. You don't love someone and then betray them like this. Not like that." Vanessa lowered her gaze, and I could see the regret in her eyes, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough to undo what had been done. "David," she said softly, her voice breaking. "Please don't do this. We can work through it. We can fix this." I shook my head. "No, Vanessa. It's too late for that. I'm not going to keep living in a lie. I don't want to live like that anymore." For a moment we just sat there in silence. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on both of us. I didn't want to be here, I didn't want to be having this conversation, but I knew I had to face it head on. I had to stand my ground. "I don't want to fix it," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done." Vanessa's face crumpled, and she stood up quickly, wiping away the tears that had fallen down her cheeks. She didn't say anything else, just turned and walked out of the studio without another word. The door closed behind her with a quiet thud, and for a long time I sat there, letting the silence fill the space. The finality of it all hit me. I had made my decision. It was over. But that didn't make it any easier. Over the following weeks, things slowly started to settle into a new rhythm. I threw myself into my work, focusing on music, on the artists I was producing, on the creative process that had always been my refuge. It wasn't an easy escape, but it was the only one I had. I felt the weight of the divorce on my shoulders, but with each day the heaviness lifted just a little bit more. Vanessa, on the other hand, seemed to be unraveling. I saw the changes on social media, the once perfect image she had cultivated beginning to crack. Her followers dwindled, and the brand deals she had so effortlessly secured started to dry up. People were talking. The world of influencers was a fickle one, and the public quickly turned on her. The perfect life she had shown the world, the glamorous photos, the sponsored posts, the happy couple facade, was fading away. I wasn't happy about it. Seeing her fall from grace didn't bring me any satisfaction. I was relieved, yes, but it wasn't a victory. It was just the end of a chapter in both of our lives. But for me, it was also the beginning of something else. A life free from the constant drama, from the lies, from the weight of carrying someone else's mistakes. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. Time passed, and with it, the rawness of the divorce began to fade. In the beginning, it felt like a heavy cloud that lingered over me, blocking out any possibility of joy or peace. But as the days turned into weeks, I found myself breathing easier. I didn't feel the weight of someone else's choices pressing down on me anymore. I threw myself into my work even more than I had before. Producing music had always been my escape, but now, it became my sanctuary. It wasn't just a job anymore, it was a way for me to regain control over my life, to create something beautiful, something real. My focus was sharper than ever, and I started to make progress on projects I had once pushed aside. The music I produced felt more genuine, more alive than it had in a long time. Every note, every beat seemed to carry the energy I had been missing. For the first time in years, I felt free. The constant turmoil that had surrounded me was gone, and I was no longer tethered to a relationship that had drained me. I could breathe, and the air was clearer than it had been in a long time. It wasn't easy, of course. There were moments when the emptiness crept in, when I missed the companionship I had shared with Vanessa, the good times, the moments of connection we once had. But those thoughts grew quieter with time. I realized I was better off without the lies, the distractions, and the constant chaos. In the weeks following our split, Vanessa's world seemed to unravel. The social media following she had built so carefully began to shrink. The sponsors, the brand deals, everything that had once made her a shining star in the influencer world, started to fade. It was almost surreal to watch. I couldn't help but feel a bit of satisfaction in knowing that it was the result of her own actions, but it wasn't the satisfaction of revenge. More than anything, I felt a quiet relief that I had gotten out when I did. I wasn't part of her world anymore, but I could see the fallout. I'd hear about it in passing or see a post here and there. People started to talk. The public had a way of taking someone from the highest pedestal and crashing them down. Vanessa, once at the top of the influencer food chain, was now struggling to keep up. She had become just another person in a sea of faces, her carefully crafted image crumbling in the wake of the scandal. But that was her story, not mine. I kept my distance, focusing on the things that mattered, my work, my peace, and most of all, myself. I started doing things I had neglected for so long. I'd go on long hikes, sit at cafes, and read books I had always wanted to explore but never had the time for. Slowly but surely, I began to rediscover who I was outside of the chaos of my marriage. I started to reconnect with old friends too, the ones I had lost touch with over the years. People who had been pushed aside when Vanessa and I were constantly in the spotlight. It felt good to laugh again, to share stories and catch up on the things I had missed. I had forgotten what it felt like to have deep, genuine friendships, not ones tainted by the constant swirl of drama that had been part of my life with Vanessa. Then one evening I met someone new. Her name was Maya. She wasn't like anyone I had met before. She wasn't impressed by the glamorous world I lived in. She wasn't interested in being in the spotlight, and she had her own career that kept her grounded. We met through a mutual friend, and what started as a casual conversation soon turned into something more. It was refreshing. She made me laugh, made me think about life in ways I hadn't considered in years. We began to spend more time together, and for the first time in a long time I found myself looking forward to seeing someone, not because of what they could offer but because of who they were. Maya wasn't interested in fixing me. She wasn't trying to save me from anything. She just wanted to be with me, to enjoy life together without the weight of anyone else's expectations. It was liberating. There were still moments when I thought about Vanessa, the past, the hurt, the lies. But with each passing day, those thoughts grew more distant. I had learned that life moves forward even when you feel like you're stuck in place. And the more I let go of the past, the more room there was for new experiences, new connections, and new opportunities. I wasn't the same person I was when I was married to Vanessa. I had grown, evolved, and found a sense of peace that had been missing for so long. The pain of the divorce, while still there, no longer defined me. I wasn't living in the shadow of someone else's mistakes anymore. I was living for myself, and that made all the difference. As I stood on the balcony of my apartment one evening, looking out over the city, I realized something important. The life I had now was mine. And no matter what had happened in the past, I was finally in control of my future. The weight that had once held me down was gone, and I was free.